I worked in a lot of areas, and this will tell you how long ago this was. I was the youngest manager, so that was a while ago, and I got stuck doing the United Way campaign. And, and so I thought, well, if we're going to do it, let's do it. You know, and so we really got with the Teamsters, and I found this guy, Crusher Kowalski, who was a huge pro wrestler in the 70s and 60s, and he was just a compelling force, and I brought him in. He talked eloquently about boys and girls clubs and these great stories. Our United Way campaign went up 80%. Next year went up 30%, and again using Crusher, and that got the attention of the nonprofit sector, and I actually moved to become controller of United Way. So I credit the Crusher, and I think he brainwashed me a little bit, all these super compelling stories, and I thought, I work really hard to sell more sugar water. And so anyway, and I still love Coke, but the company, but that's how I came here.
Wow, the Crusher. Well, I remember the Crusher.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did he beat Vern Gagne?
Well, it was real. Did you know that pro wrestling is? No.
Well, yeah.
I'd have to go back and look at the scripts to know if he beat him or not, yeah.
I think I thought it was real when I was growing up and it was on a lot, and then, I don't know, someone told me later and I was shocked.
Well,
yeah.
Absolutely.
So you moved there, and you are at LSS, and I think that my knowledge of LSS ties to its beginnings, which you have here. So my memory is of my cousins, Paul and Robert, being adopted, and I think it was in 1968.
Sure.
They came to North Dakota. They, Dorothy and Gordy had come down here, and they were able to get these kids, and they were so excited.
Wonderful. Yeah, we hear that a lot. I meet a lot of people who say, I was adopted through either Children's Home, which is an entity of ours too, or LSS. Yeah. Really moving stories. So to go back to the beginning, our origin story is around adoption. In 1865, so we're just entering our 160th year, LSS is, as an organization. Our origin story is that Eric Norelius, who's a pastor in Thueson, Minnesota, just outside of Red Wing. I've been there. They have a little museum there in the basement. If you're ever there, call ahead, and it's a great presentation. But Eric read the paper that there is 4 orphan children in Minneapolis. Didn't know them. They weren't Lutheran. And he saddled up his blind horse, which was a gift from his congregation. I don't know if that's kind of like Cars for Kids, where you don't know what to do with a car. Gee, thanks, a blind horse. We actually don't have a blind horse. Let's give it to the pastor. Anyway, that was a grueling trip. And I put that it's Eric and Inga, because I've been married long enough to know you can have any number of ideas in the world, but I know who's going to do the work, and it would be, in our case, it would be my wife, Luba. So that's how we started 160 years ago.
Wow.
And Eric has one of the great lines. I thought of our service this morning. The pastor was talking about where I have a ledger of his where he gets a sack of potatoes, Eric Norelius, and he gets a pound of flour from his congregants, and then he says at the end of the report for the year, our resources are at an end, but God lives. And I just always have that in my mind. Fortunately, our resources aren't at an end, but yes.
Wow, times were tough.
They were. And he also founded Gustavus, which is a much better organization than LSS. Everybody knows that. Yes.
Yeah.
Partners. And then some other organizations in the Lutheran community too. So he was quite the go-getter.
Wow.
Yeah. So fast forward 160 years, LSS now serves 91,000 individuals and families every year in Minnesota and beyond. That's 1 in 63 Minnesotans. We have about 30-ish different lines of service, very distinct from each other. So that equates, like I said, 1 in 63 Minnesotans are served by LSS. LSS is the social service arm of the Lutheran Evangelical Church in America. Our board is appointed by the ELCA. It's very much front and center for us. Some organizations across the country have moved away from Lutheran. We see that making zero sense. So we are actually always looking for opportunities to partner better with Lutherans and Lutheran organizations. We say it's a movement of 25,000. We have 3,000 employees. We have 10,000 volunteers, and we have about 12,000 donors and funding partners.
That's a lot of people.
It is.
And that is actually part of your specialty, I think,
I think so.
is getting those services out and innovating how to get those out, which is extremely complicated.
It's what I like about it, and I think it's what I liked about Coke too. It's just the complexity of things, and it's really nice because it builds on the great work. I mean, I'm hugely impressed with this congregation. It's beautiful, the work, the ministry is beautiful. There's other opportunities where there might be services that don't make sense for a congregation in Baudette or Laverne to do, and so we partner with a lot of, including this organization too.
Yeah.
So moving on, see if I can actually do a clicker and a thing. So I'm going to offer 2 sets of 3. The first is to understand LSS as I understand it. Our mission is to express the love of Christ for all people through service that changes lives, builds hopes, and builds community. I actually messed it up. Inspires hope, changes lives, and builds community. Our vision is that all people have the opportunity to live and work in community with full and abundant lives. The common word there that we often underline is all. We are here to serve every kind of person that God made. So that's what we aspire to do. And then importantly, our team members are very much a part of that. We've been doing well. We're strong, stable, growing, and I credit our teams of professionals across Minnesota and beyond who just recognize community needs and scale up new programs to serve them. One quick aside about our team members. We were blessed to be in the Star Tribune poll, anonymous poll of employees that say, we got a top workplace award, and we have for a few years, so I'm very grateful. Yeah. That's my way of bragging. If I thought I had something to do with it, it'd sound like bragging, but I have very little to do with that. We just have wonderful mission-oriented teams, and my point is, in these anonymous surveys, 94% of our team members knew well the vision and mission of LSS. 94% is really, really high.
That's really high. That is great.
97% said the organization does deeply meaningful work. And then 98%, this is a part that amuses me, 98% said they at LSS do deeply meaningful work. So I was giving them a hard time. I said, I think you're saying that your work is 1% more important than the people you work with, but I'm not sure. So, but anyway, that's the first set of 3. And then, and the most common word to describe it by our employees in that survey, 2 words, welcoming and innovative. And so with that, even I can't mess that up if we have a team like that. And then the second set of 3 I'd like to offer, and please interrupt anytime. I didn't mean to turn this into a monologue, but I just wanted to describe the organization before we chat a bit. Most of our services are broken into 3, lack of a better term, buckets. The first bucket is services for people with disabilities. That's about 60% of whom we serve. The second bucket, for lack of a better term, is older adults. And then the third bucket is this potpourri of children, youth, and family services. Here we like to have the person, so I'll do 3 of those, but I like to have the person in the middle, and then these are our services that surround it. And so you can see that for people with disabilities, starting in that lower left, these will be the same pie chart in each one. We do have homes. We also have work in community. We make sure people get the most full and abundant lives possible. Our tagline, for lack of a better term, is my life, my choices. We want the least restrictive possible environment. So here we have meals, going around the circle, connectivity. A lot of what LSS does is connectivity, fighting isolation. Great organizations in the world that we partner with are about getting people through the next 24 hours. I would offer that LSS's forte is more about taking people on the outskirts of society, listening to what they want to accomplish in their own life, and then helping them, removing barriers for them to change their own lives. They lead this process. Going around, we have care coordination, a lot of behavioral health. About 50% of the people we serve with disabilities also have a mental health problem, or diagnosis is the correct word. And then we do a lot of employment. I love visiting our locations for services across the state. I'll talk a little bit about that. Meeting the people who serve and meeting the people who are thriving in community, those we do serve. If I don't get there by 9 in the morning, they're gone. They're working or volunteering in community, and a lot of them live on their own. So it's quite an array of services already. So I'll share a little bit about that hopefully later. Older adults is a second bucket. You'll notice in the lower left-hand corner, we do not have nursing facilities. That's one thing we don't do. There's a lot of good organizations, Lutheran and otherwise, that do that. We don't. We are the largest provider of senior nutrition meals. We do frozen, congregate meals. Connectivity is hugely important. I actually did want to share a couple stats on this, if I could. So older adults who are experiencing isolation have a 30% increase of chance of heart disease, 50% chance of increased chance of dementia, and a 50% increased chance, if they're isolated and lonely, of dying early. So we see ourselves as hugely important in breaking down isolation. And so financial counseling, education, opportunities. Oh, they had the LEFSA thing this morning?
Yeah.
I was in a congregate dining site in Baudette, up by the northern, or it was Roseau, I actually don't remember which it was, and they were doing LEFSA that day. And they said, where are you from? And they never really clicked that I was the CEO, I don't think, but that's fine, I didn't care about that. And so I was meeting people, served, and the people said, hey, we're making LEFSA today. We got stacks of potatoes, and they had these huge 100-pound bags. And they said, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Stillwater. And they said, oh, we're peeling potatoes today. Like, and about 3 different people told me this. Oh, we're peeling potatoes today for LEFSA. I finally figured out they thought I was from Stillwater Prison.
Oh!
So they had a James Cagney type image of me doing that. And then, so that's at the northern border. Another little quick story. I was in Tracy or Laverne, I don't remember which.
Southwest.
Yeah, Southwest. Yeah. And I went to the lunch there, and there's a woman who's she's been volunteering, was there to take money for 38 years for LSS. 38 years, wow. Every day, 8 a.m. to noon, every weekday. And I disliked her immediately. She said, I assume you qualify for the older adult meal. It's like, hey, well, yeah, I do, but it doesn't mean you have to say that. But anyway, I had lunch with a guy who was 105 and drove there, to which I, just 5 minutes, give me 5 minutes to get out of the parking lot. No, he was fine. So anyway, a long way to say it, that's my favorite thing is visiting sites. And then the third and final bucket is this big potpourri of children, youth, and family. And there we do housing. We do a lot of training on how to stay in your house. We're really good at financial counseling for families, veterans, mental health counseling. During the last economic downturn, if you had financial counseling from LSS, 92% were paid in full. We teach people how to handle money, budget. We don't do debt consolidation and move on to the next problem. The industry, so we were 92% paid in full. The average for that industry is 32%. So we're really good at that, and I really am looking for new ways to grow that.
What are you doing right, do you think?
Listening first. If I could credit one thing, and is just listening first. What do you want to accomplish? Not judging people, and then, okay, this is what you want to accomplish. Let's start removing stuff. Let's start removing what you see as a barrier to just a more abundant life. So,
yeah, I think something you said earlier ties into that, and that's having people make their own choices,
yes.
Giving them the information. That's when we feel best, right? We are controlling our lives
exactly.
to some extent.
Yes.
And then the welcoming and the connectivity, you don't see that often, or the welcoming and the innovation.
Yeah.
Yeah, those two don't sometimes go in tandem.
You know, innovation is hugely important. I'll talk about it a little bit maybe in a bit, but we're starting a design laboratory and a measurement function and an incubator where we get ideas from our employees and from community members to get better programs. The thing I'd like to measure is what's the least amount of time we can interact with a person or family and get them to self-sufficiency. We don't want this interaction to create dependency. We want to break cycles of dependency. Kind of like in this area, we have a therapeutic preschool, and thanks to our Synod partnerships, we're opening a second one on the east side of St. Paul now, but we could do them anywhere in the state. This is for children in preschool who have already been through so much trauma that they're not ready for first grade. Teachers in the St. Paul School District, in this one that we do, are quitting on the job because of the behaviors. And yet our preschool graduates 95% ready for first grade. And we work with the parents too. And this goes to your point is it's a two-generation approach. There's a lot of people who want to be good parents but have never experienced it in their own lives, and we can break those cycles. I had somebody tell me, either build more preschools or build more prisons. It's really up to you. And I know that sounds really dramatic, but that is the trajectory the children we serve are on. So,
yeah. They just otherwise just keep repeating.
Yeah.
So you break that but at a young age, and how do you get people into that preschool?
We take referrals. Sometimes it's from a criminal justice system that the family has happened. Sometimes it's from a county. Most of what we do across all of LSS is word of mouth. But we do get referrals. Congregations, often, sometimes with financial counseling and mental health counseling, congregations are a large source. So.
That's tremendous, isn't it? I mean,
we're very grateful.
Wow.
We're very grateful. Yeah. So, if I could, a couple stories from the road. Again, this is my favorite thing to do. I have learned so much. When I was at Coke, I learned a process called and I'll slaughter this, but the Japanese call it getsi gembutsu. See it for yourself. Always learn an organization by seeing it yourself. And so when I first started, I haven't thought about the early days post-Coke for a long time. First I wanted to see what our group homes were like. So I went to a staff meeting, and they said, I hadn't been there very long. They said, Patrick Thueson or something like that. It's Thueson. But anyway, you did a great job. Yeah. But is here, and I was essentially an accountant. And they said, there's 200 people there. They said, we're going to start with some mission moments. First story is about a guy named Jeff who had a traumatic brain injury. And so each person would stand up. Here's what's going on in my service. Stands up and says, we found Jeff in a older adult assisted living. Not the right place for a 22-year-old kid. He just had a traumatic brain injury, and that's how he ended up there. Largely in a vegetative state. We took him into one of our traumatic injury homes, have weaned him off drugs for about 18 months. Last week, Jeff got a job and is leaving us, and he has no dependency on any assistance. Next one was about Henry. You know, and I'm sitting there listening to this stuff. Henry, some woman stands up that works for LSS and said, Henry came to us from an organization that isn't very person-centered in the way they deliver services. He has intellectual disabilities. And again, they got him to a much better place, and was living really quite independently. But they noticed every time the phone would ring, Henry would stand up and go in his room and shut the door. And finally they said, why are you doing that? And he said, well, at the last place I was, they told me that if the phone rang, it was somebody important, and I should lock myself in my room until I'm told to come out. It's like, LSS views this as your home. We don't do that. And so, of course, this woman's mad as a wet hen and calls the case manager from the other place and says, Henry says this, and is that really true? And long pause, and the woman says, Henry can talk? 5 years without talking because of the medications he was on, and also not being asked. So then they turned to me, and I've got a list in front of me that I wanted to talk to him about that is so trite. It's like, do you really have to use so many pencils? Or, you know, so, and if I could, just one final story with Halloween coming up. A little while ago, I was in a group home, and there's one of the people served there, and again, we want them to have their passions. You walk into their room, they've got it decorated as they want. Maybe ponies are the biggest thing in the world, or Vikings, or whatever. This person's hugest thing in the world, person with intellectual disabilities, is Wizard of Oz. So the staff lets them watch Wizard of Oz every day. I like that movie too. Every day for 2 hours. I mean, that's a bit of a, I don't know, it's out of the norm. Yeah, exactly. And so anyway, so instead of getting fed up with it, as I would, Halloween comes and they all dress up like characters from Wizard of Oz to surprise him. And then they take the front steps where the kids are going to be coming and make it into a yellow brick road.
Oh.
So the point of that story, and of course he's...
Yeah.
The point of the story is, that's the listening. Not just to what you want to accomplish, but what do you want your life to be like? And we're blessed to have people, 98%, who can find that in their job every day. So that is one of my road stories.
Wow. Well, I think I'm going to turn it over to you guys because you will have great questions. I'm really impressed.
Hi, I don't know LSS's programming, but when you put that first circle chart on disabilities, I'm wondering if your services reach out, like we might adopt a sister church in South Minneapolis, El Salvador, somewhere and support their ministries, which are the same as ours. So, but you don't look at it as competitors. We're supporting. So I'm wondering if that cycle on disabilities reminded me so much of what Hammer Residences does, and I'm wondering if your budget helps support organizations that do and have priorities and missions similar to yours? Like, does LSS have funding to go that way?
Yeah. In a way, yes. In a way, no. Hammer is a great partner, and we partner with them a lot in finding the right setting for a person to thrive. And then we're in a best practices group with them. I wouldn't think of them as competitors. But our funding, it's interesting, in disabilities, the funding goes to the person. They can go anywhere. So they get their funding, and this is just for disabilities. They get their funding, and it's almost like a free marketplace. They can go to Hammer, they can go to a for-profit, they can go to LSS. So we focus on the quality of care, and I'm sure Hammer does too, and tracking quantifiable results in people's lives. Sitting down with somebody every year and saying, what do you want? How happy are you, red, yellow, or green, like a stoplight, with your housing, with your job, with whatever, your education? What do you want to accomplish for the next year? So, and we've shared that with any number of organizations, and they've shared improvements with us. So we work together, but money-wise, it's already the person served.
Well, I was going to ask you, what are your 3 biggest challenges as a CEO? And then I looked at your slide.
Yes.
So maybe I'm just asking you to share that kind of from a sustainability perspective.
Yeah. We've been blessed, sustainability-wise, I'll say this. We've grown 50% in the last 5 years. That 91,000 is up 91,000 people.
It was 51,000, I think, in whatever we saw. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where 51,000 comes from, but it's 91,000.
Yeah.
1 in 63 Minnesotans. If you go back 3 years, it was 30% less. So we're growing, we're healthy, we're stable, we're very blessed. We have wonderful partners. A challenge we've come out of, to a degree, is staffing. Jobs are very, so we surround people who want to work for us. We can't always pay the most. That's kind of a nonprofit thing. But we offer them the things we do for the general public. So we do the financial counseling, tuition assistance when we can. We look for sources for that, help with housing. So we try to improve the whole value proposition. We try to find them daycare, et cetera. But I'd say our 3 biggest challenges are Minnesota's 3 biggest challenges here. The demographics of a changing Minnesota, we have a big presence in greater Minnesota. Over 50% of what we do is in greater Minnesota, pretty close. The changing demographics of an aging greater Minnesota, not enough people to serve there. That's why we're moving towards technology. We use iPads for older adults. They take iPads and our caregiver respite services, where a person can say, my spouse is starting to do this. So if somebody has dementia, has anybody else seen that? It results in a 98% increase in connectivity. So that's one challenge that I would say is a Minnesota challenge. I'm not sure. We're just going to keep throwing every innovation we can come up with and expand where we can. The complexity of consumers. I mentioned the woman who's volunteered for LSS for 38 years. That's a different model than the baby boomers want to do. It's not 5 days a week. It's more, I can do every 3rd Thursday. That's a challenge for us. It's a different model, so it changes ours. And then people want services like they want services. It's more consumer directed, and I think that's a good thing for outcomes. And where we can create better measurements of actual quantifiable outcomes, that's our forte. The things I mentioned, like the design laboratory, the measurement function, having systems that put the person served and listens better to lived experience. And then innovation. There is no funding for innovation from a governmental source, that not a material amount that I've run across, and yet innovation, as you heard earlier, is one of the 2 big things, welcoming and innovation. So we have to look to other sources to get money for innovation, but we'll keep doing that. So those are the 3. To eventually answer your question, there you go, yeah.
What would you have us know about the changing Minnesota?
If the importance of listening to that person's lived experience. The uniqueness of the person served, who I mentioned again, LSS is a little bit different model. We do some shelters to get through people through the next 24 hours. Our strength is how well we listen to the dreams they want to accomplish in their lives and invite them into community. So inviting, again, as we go back to that mission and vision statement, all people into community, that's going to be critical for us. And when I say us, I mean Minnesota. We need to listen to each other in new ways and challenging ways and accepting ways. And it's a beautiful tapestry. Minnesota is a beautiful tapestry of people who just want to help neighbors serving neighbors. We see it here in this congregation. We see it all across Minnesota. So that's how I view the changing demographics. One thing, people say it's a more diverse state. We've been blessed that our leadership and our staff are actually more diverse than the Minnesota population. There's a stigma a little bit around Lutherans in some mindsets of it being predominantly white, and I'm not saying that's not true, but our leadership and our people served are very diverse. In fact, higher percent of people of color in our leadership team, top leadership team, than Minnesota or the people served.
So one of the things that we pride ourselves on here at Trinity is our outreach activities, and it's been mentioned in your remarks so far. But what are tangible ways in which we could volunteer to help out an LSS project?
We look for ways to partner. This is a beautiful ministry. Want to listen first, don't want to do anything, want to assist with anything wherever it's helpful, practices or whatever. If somebody has a passion for something that's not happening in their particular congregation, please go. I brought some summaries of what's in this county, and find your passion, see if LSS does that. Again, we have 30 different lines of service. We serve a very broad array of different models of people and practices. I would really encourage you. Oh, and you can go to the LSS website or take one of these flyers and put in your zip code or your address and hit whatever thing you want as far as distance, 25 miles, and it'll tell you all the services in that area. So always looking for volunteers. But again, you have such a beautiful thing going, I don't want to interfere with that. But if there's something additional that you want to do, we would welcome your partnership.
Well, I feel like I learned a lot about LSS, and you've been so great and such a wonderful representative, and I have a lot of trust and faith in what you're doing, and hope to work together.
That would be wonderful.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Oh, can I say what Be the Buffalo is? Very quickly, we had fun with this. It's kind of corny, but it reminds me of your congregation as well. So that's why I want to say it, is when things were really tough during COVID and the riots after George Floyd's murder, and by the way, the neighborhood protected some of our facilities. It was not as, it was a enriching time, put it that way, but it was challenging. And our employees were going through a lot. We have a phrase called "Be the Buffalo," and I would offer this to you too. If you're out in the Great Plains and you see a storm coming across the fields, a cow will run away from it. And that makes the storm last longer because they're going the same direction as the storm. A buffalo, which is a very wise animal, will run towards the storm. And that's what we have fun with, just saying, when we look at those challenges that we talked about today in Minnesota, we tell each other, hey, be the buffalo. And I will thank you for being the buffalo in your community and congregation. Thank you.